Hey, what's going on, guys? It is Blacktop here. Today I'm going to bring you a video titled The Floodgate Problem. I kind of wanted to make a different version of this video that had that dealt with hand traps as well as floodgates, like the typical floodgates like you'd think of as on the screen right now. But I didn't. I think the hand trap problem video would be for another time, maybe sometime later this week. I don't know. I'm just starting college again. This is my junior year, so it's getting kind of busy, with homework and everything like that. So anyway, this is going to be the floodgate problem today. And as you can see on the screen, Anti-Spell Fragrance, Goes and Match, and Rivalry of Warlords, those are three very common examples of floodgates in this game. Some people like them, some people don't. Today I'm going to give you my thoughts and sort of my reasoning as to where they should be and what their sort of role and place should be in the game. So anyway, just please sit back. And after this video, if you disagree, if you agree with me, just let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Anyway, let's get into it. So the question of the video is, should floodgates exist in this game? This is the problem, right? A lot of people think floodgates are oppressive or they just aren't very fun to play against. But a lot of people also think that floodgates are necessary in controlling what their opponent can do. I guess I could try to give examples for both sides here. So on the supporting the floodgate side, you could say that, well, look, let's look at things like Goki right now that can extra link you and not allow you to play the game. Floodgates are, of course, a counter to that because they slow down the opponent's deck if they can do something crazy, right? If they can make huge unbreakable boards, it slows them down. If they can FTK, they can slow them down. So that's like one thing for floodgates. But against floodgates, you could say, well, look, I'm playing a rogue deck that can't play floodgates. If my opponent plays floodgates against me, I have no chance of competing, even if my deck would normally do well if there were no floodgates in this game. I've heard both sides of this have given arguments, and I've watched people doing YouTubers doing live streams of this and other people in the game talking, and I think there are several problems with floodgates, and I'll try to highlight those for you today. So some examples of floodgates, we have like Anti-Spell Fragrance, Goes and Match, and Rivalry of Warlords. Those are some really common things. Anti-Spell, of course, requires you to set spell cards before activating them. So pretty much if you go first and you open Anti-Spell Fragrance, you set it, go to your opponent, and during their standby phase you flip this, and so now any normal spells like Monster Reborn or like Goki Rematch, Soul Charge, anything like that your opponent wants to play, they cannot activate during this turn. Now quick play spells, of course, I guess kind of don't really matter. I mean, your opponent can't play like an MST or anything like that. Now, they could, if you activated this, they could chain MST if they had it in their hand, or a Twin Twisters or something like that. So that's really the only way to out this immediately. But otherwise, your opponent is stuck setting their spells for the rest of this turn if this card resolves. Goes and Match and Rivalry are kind of the same thing. Basically, it allows your opponent to only control one either type or attribute of monster. Goes and Match, I think, is the attribute one, and Rivalry of Warlords is the type one. So I know a lot of excuse me, a lot of true Drago decks, whenever those were sort of in prominence, they would play Rivalry of Warlords and sometimes Anti-Spell Fragrance because they could, because all the true Dracos were worm type monsters, and of course after they do all their plays and stuff, if they get their masterpiece out on board, Anti-Spell was just a great floodgate, to stop their opponent from doing anything. So those are three examples of continuous trap floodgates. There are probably some more. I just can't think of any off the top of my head right now. Basically any card that says your opponent can't add cards from the deck to the hand except by drawing them or things like that. Can't search, can't do this. Those are all floodgates. So kind of along that same vein, Droll and Lockbird and Max C are also sort of floodgates in a way. Droll and Lockbird is it's probably more clear to see that it's a floodgate as opposed to Max C, because Droll and Lockbird says if your opponent searches a card or adds a card from their deck to hand except by drawing, you can play it, and then for the rest of this turn, immediately after that effect resolves, your opponent cannot add any more cards in the deck to the hand. That is an inherent floodgate because it prevents the opponent from doing anything. Maxi sort of works in kind of an opposite manner. Basically, it's like a reverse floodgate, but it still does the floodgate thing type deal. So basically, Maxi, what it does is when your opponent special summons a monster, each time they do that, you get to draw a card. So that's why Maxi is banned right now, because Konami thinks that, well, that's a bad way to stop your opponent by getting advantage yourself. And so that's how Maxi works as a floodgate, because if your opponent special summons a lot, so like Gokis, or really any tier 1, tier 2 deck that's involves a lot of special summoning. So like pretty much everything except True Dracos when it was tier 1, it would be hit by Max C pretty hard. So that's why Max C is a good card. That's why it's banned right now, and it works as a floodgate in that way. It sort of creates this mindset for your opponent that he or she does not want to special summon any more monsters, and it prevents them passively, because you would get advantage from that. And also, another type of floodgate, it's not really like technically a floodgate, but a lot of people hate this sort of aspect of the game now, especially after Master Rule 4, and that is extra linking. Extra linking, if you don't know, is when your opponent can control a monster in one extra monster zone, have code-linked link monsters that lead all the way to the second extra monster zone, and they have a link monster in that monster zone, which is perfectly legal to do as of Master Rule 4. And Gokis seem to be the best deck that can do that right now. A lot of people hate playing against Goki because they can't easily out this board. Goki also has a lot of bodies on board and some negates too, so it's really hard to go up against Gokis and their extra linking. I would call this a floodgate because, of course, like you can't make extra deck plays. And I think like one thing Master Rule 4 got right, and this is for a whole nother video, but one thing Master Rule 4 got right was that decks that spammed extra deck monsters needed to be slowed down a little bit. But what they got wrong was the extra linking thing. Like, I'd be totally fine if all they did was release link 2 monsters with the bottom left and bottom right arrow that were highly specific, and that could supported the deck that they were supposed to support. But now we see things, like all these monsters here, everything that Goki can do. Firewall Dragon. I mean, he was one of the first couple of link monsters that came out in Code of the Duelist, and it's just a dumb card, like the way it works. It's just free advantage essentially. So that's like extra linking to me seems to be sort of a floodgate in that sense, because you can't play your extra deck monsters if your opponent extra links you. And with Goki, it's relatively easy to do. So here are some solutions to this problem here. So basically, for anything, and this is of course my personal opinion. So any restrictive, direct, or lasting floodgate. So anything that actively prevents your opponent from doing anything. So like anti-spell, goes in match, rivalry. Any of those should be to 0 because they're really easy to use. Yes, they are hard draws. You can't search them. I don't think there's any continuous trap searcher in the game, or at least not one that's easily accessible and that people would play in their decks. So that's those should be a 0 because your opponent can't do anything. Like you shut them down. The only way your opponent could out those is if they had a quick play spell that destroys your spell cards or anything like that. I don't know, but that's pretty much it. So any of those, even Droll and Lockbird in this sense, Droll and Lockbird kind of works in the same way, but it's a little bit different, and because it only lasts for one turn or whatever, and even though that could be enough to stop your opponent, Droll and Lockbird is also really good if you're going second, and really most of these floodgates are played when you're going first. So Droll and Lockbird's kind of in the area. That's why I said for indirect or non-lasting floodgates like Droll and Lock, Max C, things like that, go to 2 or 3. I think Droll and Lock would be a good candidate to go to 1 or 2. Probably not at 3, but Max C I think should go to 3. If we keep decks like Goki that can extra link you in the game, decks that can create insane boards that special summon a lot to do really oppressive things, I think Max C is very important in that sense, because Max C does not directly stop your opponent, but if your opponent is smart enough and they want to try to win the game after your opponent Max C's you, they will try to extend as little as possible so as to not give more advantage to their opponent. And really, when Max C is in a format, when Max C is legal and people are playing it, you could really tell who is the smarter player, because if your opponent plays Max C, you're like, okay, you know what? That's it. That's all I'm gonna do. You go. I'm gonna try to survive till the next turn and then make my plays then. And thus the problem with Max C, which is again for a whole nother video, but the problem with Max C being at 1 or 2 is that you have a very small chance of playing it, and typically when you do draw it, it comes down to whoever draws Max C wins the game. That's pretty much it. So when it's a 3, it's fair for both players, or a little bit more so, because both players have a better chance of drawing it, especially in the 5 cards that they get. So I think it makes more sense to have Max C. Max C is either a 3 or a 0 thing, right? So you either have to have a really good chance of drawing, or the best chance of drawing it that you can to make it most fair, or it's 0, that way nobody can draw it. But anyway, Max C I think is good because it's indirect. It doesn't inherently like stop your opponent. Your opponent has to make the decision to stop themselves. So that's why I like it. And finally, the extra linking thing. Extra linking decks like Goki should be severely limited or hurt in a way on the forbidden and limited list, so that they cannot oppress their opponents as easily. I think going against a Goki deck that can extra link you is just very frustrating. It's like, well, oh, okay, you do this, you can't play the game anymore, you know. And I think in the best case scenario, extra linking would be banned, but there have already been cards released that have to do with extra linking. Konami's not gonna, go back on one of their mechanics. Like the only time they did that was really with pendulum summoning, and that's by putting the pendulum zones to the the left and right most spell and trap zone. And I guess they also did hit every extra deck summoning mechanic by Master Rule 4, but they're not gonna, especially at this point in time, they're not gonna prohibit the extra link. I don't see that happening. So anyway, so the Forbidden and Limited list should take care of the Gokis. The one thing I will say though is that Maxi, putting it to 3 could possibly combat Goki, because Goki special summons a whole lot, and if you can draw 5 cards off of your opponent's special summoning that much if they don't know how to play against Maxi, that would be great for you. You could have all sorts of ways to get to the cards you need, even through the negates that Goki boards can set up. So that's why I like Max C. But I hate lasting floodgates, and I hate extra linking too, which is in itself kind of a floodgate. So those are my solutions. Just let me know what you think down below in the comments. And if you liked this video and enjoyed this video, please leave me a like and give me a subscribe if you really liked me that much, I guess, so I can continue making this content. Anyway, this is Blacktop YGO signing out. Thank you.